we start over here?
Okay. I'm Raymond Wallentuken. I'm the Director of Mining Operations for North America with Bitmain.
Farbu Nivi, CEO, co-founder of CoinMine.
Mitchell Moose, Managing Editor at Crypto Briefing.
Kirstie Lee Minahan, troublemaker.
And I'm still Steve Adams.
All right, so let's start us off with a fairly easy question here. Like, proof of work mining, what's the value? Why are you doing this expensive process that uses as much electricity as Morocco and makes all these emissions that people tend to criticize? Like, what's the point?
I love talking about this stuff. Maybe I'll throw some wacky philosophical things out there. So, people like to equate Bitcoin to gold quite a bit. I actually think gold is also proof of work. So to get gold, crazy things have to happen. First, a star has to be born, it has to burn for billions of years, and it has to explode into a supernova. Then that actually has to happen twice. Another star also has to be born, burn for billions of years, explode into a supernova, and both of these stars have to leave neutron stars in their wake. Then those two neutron stars have to somehow collide into each other in the vastness of space. And then only then do you get gold. So gold is universally rare. All over the universe, gold is rare. There's actually, I think, a comic book series sort of dedicated to this concept that aliens are going all over the universe trying to get gold because it's so rare. So the amount of work that has to go into creating gold is unbelievable, and that's part of the value that it has. And so the amount of work and energy that has to go into creating Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies is part of the value that it has. It's not something that you can replicate easily without an additional amount of work. So it really ties into the whole philosophy and the physics of it.
I feel like you have strong opinions about
I
this.
do. So I talk a lot about how mining is the gateway drug to cryptocurrency engagement. For a lot of the people that have gotten into cryptocurrency, that have been champions or early investors, Bitcoin mining was their gateway drug. And the beauty about when Bitcoin was first released, you didn't really need an expensive machine to get involved. You could just jump in with your laptop and you didn't have to worry about expending your hard-earned fiat to dabble in this new crazy technology. That's one of the reasons that mining is such a fantastic engagement mechanism. There's nothing else like it. And as Bitcoin has become more and more valuable, and we've gotten more and more users, it's become specialized. A lot of people have started massive facilities just dedicated to securing this new financial ecosystem.
I mean, that does transition nicely into my next question, is that now that it's not accessible, is that removing an important part of what proof of stake was originally set out to do? And I think Raymond over here, who runs massive facilities of specialized hardware, might have some insight into that.
Well, I mean, let's kind of demystify some of the numbers out there. Originally, there are numbers out there that a mass amount of terahashes are located in China, and that is correct, but it's not controlled by one entity. I mean, it is quite fragmented. All over the market. So in a sense that, going back to your proof of stake, proof of work issue right now, so proof of stake is probably better up for the long term, but proof of work was, as Kirstie mentioned, that's exactly how we started. So.
Can you clarify quickly what you mean by proof of work and proof of stake for people who may not be in the know?
I haven't actually implemented this as a programmer, so Kirstie's a lot more versed in this, but from my understanding that proof of stake is you have to put your stake on there as a way to securitize what was been voted on. Whereas proof of work, it's massive computing power, it's more inefficient. Proof of stake uses less power, but it becomes more expensive to take over that network.
Why is everyone looking at me? One of the trade-offs with proof of stake is that your threat profile changes. So in proof of work, you have this physical hardware that you have to deploy, and you have to spend a capex investment as well as an opex investment, some sort of electricity expenditure. This is where proof of work becomes very invaluable when you don't want to game the system. In proof of stake, your profile completely changes. It's all digital based. So now you open yourself up to a lot of the vulnerabilities that exist in traditional security systems. All I have to do is figure out how to gain access to someone's keys, and as you know, a lot of the security industry teaches us, that's pretty easy. All I have to do is some social engineering, and once I control the keys for a staker, I control the node and I control the space. Proof of stake doesn't have this, capex and opex expenditure, which does actually harm a lot of the not transparency, but a lot of the immutability for the ledger. There are things that are currently in research to prevent this, stuff like VDF ASICs, where you do have some hardware costs and all participants are going to solve the same puzzle at the same time. But, right now we know proof of work works. Proof of stake hasn't been rolled out at any sort of scale, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays in Ethereum's ecosystem.
I think the whole story sums back up to controls and incentives. How do we drive enough activity to secure this new platform for commerce? How do we reward and incent the people to provide that capability? And then how do we secure what they put in place to be sure that people don't abuse and take advantage of it? And so each one of them is going to have their own pros and cons, but the most important thing is sufficient controls and incentives in place to enable the targeted commerce platform at the scale and life cycle we're aiming for. If we're really talking about replacing gold, then I need something that can stand up to between 5,000 and 10,000 years of innovation. That's the reason why this is such a complex story. How do I incent the human race over the next 100 generations to be sure that the thing we're doing today is still a valid method of commerce in the future?
So I heard this get brought up a few times, that a large majority of the hash rate is centralized into China. So is mining doing what it's supposed to be doing in terms of decentralizing that risk across a lot of parties, and is mining the best mechanism to do that? And especially as we start developing more specialized hardware in terms of ASICs, companies like Bitmain and Canaan start to control a lot of the supply chain. So is that a problem in terms of decentralization, or is that something that the fears are overblown for that?
I mean, it's a problem, but where the community is taking steps to fix it. So back in the day, Satoshi had this great idea that people wouldn't collude. It would be one CPU per one vote. Unfortunately, humans do collude. And this is why pools started. Pools were a great way where you could pool your computing power together and share in the block reward instead of having to win the lottery. It was meant to be a lottery-based system. When we leave a lot of the block, a lot of the transactions in the blocks to pools, it becomes a little bit centralized. So there's some protocols right now that have been proposed. One by Brains, who created the original Bitcoin mining pool. They call it Stratum V2. The other one is called Better Hash by Matt Corello, and it's actually put into place at Blockstream right now with their mining pool and their internal services. And both of these require the end user to run a node in order to mine Bitcoin. And that's going to help a lot with the decentralization process, because at that point, you're not relying on the pool as much. That really is the weak point, relying on the pool to craft your blocks and your work for you.
Yeah, I think the important thing to remember is how early we are in all of this. I mean, yeah, perhaps there's flashes of over-centralization. The ecosystem is going to react to that. Satoshi came up with an idea that we wanted to start this experiment from, but I don't think we get to an end in the next 10 years as far as what really the right long-term scale is going to be. So we need to be flexible. We need to be in it for the long term. And again, we need to be watching how the incentives are going to play out over the longer period of time. If we have the wrong incentives, if we have the wrong controls, then we run the risk of the entire experiment failing.
I think it's a challenge to evaluate Bitcoin or any other thing in cryptocurrency from a snapshot in time that you happen to be in. Like everyone's been saying, it's early. Things are changing. There's lots of proposed changes to make improvements on the things that aren't working well, improve the things that are working well. So I think if you look at things over the context of time, you got to think about it that way more than like, if we just took a snapshot today, is there too much mining here? Most of the validating, my understanding, is not in Asia, for example. Most of the validating of Bitcoin is in North America and the United States. A lot of the mining is there. Just don't look at things in a snapshot and try and understand the trend over time.
Well, I mean, as the manufacturer for ASIC mining machines, it is beneficial for Bitmain to have, originally it was started as a bunch of hobbyists who, created Bitcoin mining machines on their own computers, and then just like any other industry, once the hobbyists are done, providing the founder, the framework and the groundwork on it, then it becomes commercialized, right? So typically, you expect some sort of company to come in and make it more efficient to mine, and then as we're now seeing with CoinMine, now it's coming back to consumers in a sense. It's like they have another chance. So I think the market is shifting and adjusting for itself. In these aspects, absolutely.
So Stephen mentioned earlier that Bitcoin needs to last 100 generations for it to be comparable to gold, or if that's the niche that's trying to fulfill, that it needs to be salient, needs to be durable. So one of the long-term issues in the Bitcoin mining space is the halving. And as that halving continually happens, will Bitcoin mining revenues historically have continued to decrease, and now over the long term, it's supposed to depend on fees. Do any of you, like especially from Bitmain's perspective, from your perspective, Christy, do you find that concerning, or do you think that Bitcoin will still remain secure if it remains solely on fees versus block rewards? And the block reward is every block, some new Bitcoins are minted, but that amount is decreasing every 4 years. It's happening every 4 years.
So one of the things you see a lot in the enterprise mining market is people that are getting into Bitcoin mining are getting into it not for the profit they're going to make. They're getting into it because either they're issuing coins, or they have other business verticals that need the coins, or because they want to secure and they believe in the technology. Fidelity is a great example of this. They have mined at a loss in some of their facilities, and they don't really care about that. They figure they're doing their job securing the network. I do think Bitcoin needs to have an application for its transaction fees. Right now, the block subsidy is going to, the decreasing block subsidy is going to mean that your average Joe or your average home miner, or some of these little businesses that get into it because they're passionate about the technology, will shift off and go into another currency, or they will go towards the profit. And then you're only going to have 5 or 6, really, really big players securing your financial system. And then we're back to the traditional banking system.
Well, as Christy mentioned earlier, an infrastructure play is, there was quite a bit of consolidation that happened in early 2018, and probably more so as time progresses. But it is an infrastructure play. So at the moment, yes, a lot of these facilities are used for Bitcoin mining, crypto mining, but Bitmain, for example, is gearing up for an artificial intelligence push or some application in the crypto space that uses quite a bit of electricity. So, right, it's going to be changing here and there as time goes forward.
Yeah, I think it's a race. The utility needs to keep up with the costs. The rewards need to keep up with the costs. The concept of being able to bid on a service at that microtransaction level, though, I think could be the great unlock. If you can take something like, if you want to complete this transaction, that cost you 3 cents, that cost you 4 cents, and distribute that out broadly to the masses, like the Lightning Network attests that it is able to do, then maybe you have some sort of adoption play that gives you that utility that Bitcoin needs to continuously both incent people to participate, as well as keep the, drive people towards integrating it into their own commerce flows, integrating it into their own stores of value. So it really is can the rest of the ecosystem, can the rest of the economic model catch up before that pretty intense and pretty blunt incentive mechanism ages out? I believe the answer is yes, but it's really up to the innovators in the blockchain and e-commerce space to do so.
The question is, when does that happen? Is it 5 years, 10 years, 20, 50 years? I don't think anybody would think that we'd be sitting here talking about Bitcoin being worth $8,000 or $9,000 5, 6 years ago. So if at Bitcoin $1 million, will people be mining Bitcoin? Probably. At Bitcoin $10 million, will people be mining Bitcoin? Probably. Even though the block reward is half a Bitcoin, if it's worth $10 million, there'll be people who have the energy The other way I think about it, that some of the inputs of the costs of making this profitable are electricity. We continually get better at getting electricity from renewable resources. I think Bitcoin and crypto actually drive and accelerate renewable energy production. So if energy prices go down, if the value of Bitcoin becomes astronomical, I think the sort of will it be profitable to mine Bitcoin may be an interesting question, maybe in decades. So I don't think it's something the average person needs to worry about over the next few years.
So let's talk about energy. One of the big criticisms for Bitcoin mining is that it's quote unquote wasteful. So is, for example, proof of stake a reasonable alternative to proof of work mining?
Like I said, I think proof of work drives renewable energy production. It takes a lot of energy, but it improves the economics of renewable energy businesses, so theoretically that should make them more lucrative and better businesses to be in.
I'm worried about the security around proof of stake. Putting my asset out into the public in order for me to operationalize the network is a difficult story for me to swallow. Take a look at how much energy and effort the existing payment ecosystem costs us. I don't think it's really, when you consider that investment today and that OpEx today, I don't think the Bitcoin network's that expensive.
And a short plug for Bitmain. I mean, basically choose locations that tend to have hydropower or some sort of renewable energy because of the stability and the cheapness of that power. So that's one thing that we typically do. But the also other issue is even if they do generate this power is very expensive to transport to somewhere else. So if it's not consumed on site, I mean, a lot of that is wasted. So in a sense, we're also generating income in areas, jobs and whatnot that typically don't have a lot of job generation, or the economics of it doesn't make sense for, it makes sense for Bitmain to work there, but in terms of the economy there, it definitely does get affected in a positive way.
Why are you looking at me again? I have very strong opinions on this topic. Look, Bitcoin today consumes 6.3 gigawatts worth of energy. In the US alone, there's almost 10 or 11 gigawatts currently underutilized. In China, there's a lot more. The US banking system consumes, I think Cambridge Blockchain did an analysis on it, and it consumes almost 70% more than that today. With proof of work systems, you need to ensure that you're spending some sort of energy, and then if you want to go and reverse the transaction or be a malicious actor, you have to spend double that, roughly. This is why there's that energy expenditure component with Bitcoin mining. It helps secure the technology. You have to expend something in order to prove you're an honest actor. This is why, animals have actions that cause them, like a dog wagging its tail. It costs a lot of, very valuable calories for an animal in the wild. But their intentions there are to be true, that they're an honest actor. This is the same principle that makes up proof of work mining. When you take away that energy expenditure, you have very little risk to being a malicious actor. You can now go and game the system entirely with very little effort expended. So, yeah, I think Bitcoin's energy expenditure right now is very important for the security of the network. You take that away and it's going to cause all sorts of chaos, very unfun chaos.
All right, with that, let's open it up to questions. We got one.
When you talk about renewable energies, can you speak about folks like maybe that are using solar energy to mine? I know a company like Pluton Mining has gone out and they've actually purchased property in Southern California, out in the desert. They own the property, the infrastructure, et cetera. Could you at least address that or stuff like that? Thanks.
We have a lot of customers that have solar at home, and they buy several coin mines, and they have excess energy during the day, and they put that towards mining.
The same. I've seen quite a few companies in the US that have actually teamed up with hardware manufacturers or container providers. They have a lot of solar or wind energy that otherwise would just get wasted if it's not consumed. So it's stored and put towards Bitcoin mining. Fantastic use of energy that otherwise just burns.
It also plays well in the overall power ecosystem in the Wenatchee area and all of the hydropower there. Having that base load on the dams so that you've got effectively a reserve that you can manage without having to spin up and tear down the turbines themselves makes it easier and more efficient to operate the entire regional grid. Having this kind of predictable, clean load is actually a net win for some of those renewable energy providers and helps make the overall ecosystem stronger.
Yeah, and BitMain is in talks with solar power partners who are also looking to do this as well. So it's definitely happening.
Well, you guys, if we're not going to have any other questions here, you guys bring up a good question. Is mining a good way to help with grid management and power management in terms of load balancing and other things like that? Like you brought up a few examples, but is that one potential future use of Bitcoin mining?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the problem with some of these big power installations is that once you've got it on, it's kind of on, and the energy is, to your point, effectively wasted. So here's a way to monetize that power that effectively needs to be on standby. It's a way to continuously exercise the infrastructure so that you don't have turn up and turn down costs. It gives you an ability to respond to spikes in demand. Tell the Bitcoin miner, you gotta just slow your roll on those 10 miners for a half an hour. Everybody just got home. It becomes a super clean way for them to, again, operate the regional grid while incenting people to secure a commerce platform. You literally win on both sides of the conversation. And it allows you to do the localization that you were mentioning, where you put 1,000 miners next to a dam, and then you literally have a consume for economic profit or release for the public good, depending on what's happening in the local region. It's a pretty clean solution.
Yeah, Steve's exactly right. I mean, several of our mining farms, we might have the requirement that we have to shut down during peak times or power needs to be redistributed, and we generally always comply because that is the requirement so other people can get their energy, and that does maximize the profit of the utility company, so it's good for the city.
All right, let's hear it.
So one of the things I find interesting about I sound like God all of a sudden, sorry about that. So one of the things I found all of a sudden is the lack of education when it comes to mining, right? And it's a very important piece of this space, but I'd venture to say most people in this room don't understand how that works, as well as, say, you folks, of course, because you work in it. How do those of us in the room who want to understand more about it, how can we educate ourselves to start getting to a fraction of the level where you're at?
We're all going to look at you again.
Get involved in mining. If you have a bit of excess capital, you can get a really great miner from Bitmain now for about $1,600. Grab one, throw it in a co-location facility, and just start playing around and experimenting if you want to get more involved in Bitcoin. Otherwise, go and talk to an expert that works in the industry. Don't read any of the articles out there because I can promise you they're all wrong. CoinDesk has an educational tutorial on how Bitcoin mining works. And I spent so much of my time at Core Scientific having to re-educate folks because all of that information is wrong. It's all based on the white paper and other publicly available material. Right now, a lot of mining takes place in silos, and a lot of the education around mining takes place in silos. The same as investment in cryptocurrencies, and the same as application development in cryptocurrencies. If you work in mining today, do your job and start educating other people as well. Write about it. Help dispel some of these myths. Same thing if you're in application or investment. We need to break down these silos, and that's the only way we will get better educated.
I suppose that's a great question to end with. How can you get more involved in Bitcoin? And one way of doing that is exploring the mining side of things. And that's how a lot of people got into Ethereum, for example. So get your hands dirty.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody.
Cheers.
Give a big round of applause.